"No man is strong enough for me," said the giant Apache woman. Until she met the cowboy, the sun rose slowly over the wide desert, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was dry, carrying the scent of sand and sagebrush, and the silence was broken only by the distant calls of hawks circling high above. In this vast open land, people often felt small, but not Nayeli. She was tall, strong, and proud, with a presence that seemed to fill the space around her. She moved through the village with confidence, her steps firm on the dusty ground, her eyes sharp and watchful. Everyone who saw her could tell she was someone extraordinary. Nayeli lived in a small Apache village, surrounded by mesas and canyons. The village was simple, made of adobe homes with flat roofs, and the people relied on each other for everything. Hunting, gathering, and caring for the young and elderly were daily tasks that required strength, skill, and courage. Nayeli was exceptional at all of them. She could carry bundles of firewood twice the weight of any other woman in the village. She could run across rocky terrain without tripping, climb trees with ease, and swim in the river when it was high and swift. Even the strongest men respected her for her abilities. From a young age, Nayeli had learned to trust her own strength. Her father had been a warrior, and he had taught her how to handle a bow and arrow, how to track animals, and how to move quietly through the desert. Her mother had shown her how to care for the home, gather herbs, and prepare food. But Nayeli had always felt a pull toward the wild, untamed parts of life. She loved the freedom of the open land, the thrill of climbing cliffs, and the challenge of facing the elements on her own. She had a fierce spirit, and she rarely let anyone see her vulnerable side. As she grew older, Nayeli became known across the village and even beyond as a woman of incredible strength. Stories of her feats spread among neighboring communities. People talked about how she had lifted a heavy fallen tree to rescue a trapped goat, how she had carried water barrels from the river in the heat of summer when no one else could, and how she had faced down raiders who tried to steal from the village, refusing to back down, even when outnumbered. "No man is strong enough for me," she often said with a smile, a mixture of pride and warning in her tone. Despite her reputation, Nayeli was not cruel or arrogant. She helped her people whenever she could, taught younger children how to track and hunt, and ensured that no one in her village went hungry. She loved the land and the people she grew up with, but she had built walls around her heart. She had seen too many men who thought strength meant dominance, who tried to control or belittle others. Nayeli did not need anyone to protect her or prove themselves to her. Her independence was her pride, and she had made peace with living life on her own terms. Her days were full of work and challenge, but she welcomed it. In the morning she would rise with the sun and gather herbs and plants along the riverbanks, her movements swift and graceful. She knew the desert like the back of her hand, which plants were safe to eat, where water could be found, and how to navigate the shifting sands. By mid-morning, she often ventured out to hunt. She preferred using a bow and arrow, though she was strong enough to wield heavier weapons if needed. The hunt was not just about food. It was a test of her skills, her patience, and her connection with the land. On one particular day, Nayeli set out to track a herd of deer near the canyon's edge. The air was warm, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly before her. She crouched low, moving quietly over rocks and sand, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. Her senses were sharp, every sound and movement registering in her mind. She spotted a young buck grazing near a cluster of shrubs. With steady hands and a calm breath, she nocked an arrow and let it fly. The arrow struck true, and Nayeli approached the deer with reverence, knowing that she had taken only what was needed. After the hunt, she carried the deer back to the village, her muscles straining but her determination unwavering. Along the way, she met some villagers carrying water and supplies. They greeted her with smiles and nods, admiring her strength and skill. Naeli returned their greetings with a polite nod, but did not linger. She preferred to keep her focus on her tasks, moving through life with purpose rather than seeking attention. Naeli's life was not without its quiet moments, though. In the evenings, after her work was done, she would often sit on a high ridge overlooking the desert. The sun would sink below the horizon, turning the sky into a canvas of oranges, purples, and deep blues. She would watch the stars appear one by one, feeling a connection to something larger than herself. These moments of solitude were her sanctuary, a time to reflect and recharge. Despite her strength, Naeli valued these moments of peace, where she could simply be alone with her thoughts. The villagers had long stopped trying to persuade her to marry or settle down. Many had tried, believing that someone of her strength would be more comfortable with a partner. But Naeli always refused. She did not want to be constrained by anyone's expectations, and she had little patience for those who tried to test her independence. "No man is strong enough for me," she would repeat, and most people eventually stopped trying. Some admired her for it, while others were simply curious about how long she could maintain such fierce independence. Even the young girls in the village looked up to Naeli. She became a symbol of courage and capability, a living example that strength and determination could shape a person's life. She taught them that it was okay to be ambitious, to be strong, and to trust themselves. Naeli's presence inspired respect, not fear, because she combined her strength with fairness, compassion, and integrity. But beneath all the pride and independence, there was a part of Naeli that remained untouched. She had dreams and desires she rarely shared, feelings she rarely allowed herself to explore. Deep down, she wondered if there was anyone who could match her strength, not just physically, but in spirit and heart. For now, she kept that part of herself hidden, content with the freedom she had carved out in the desert. Life continued in its rhythm, days filled with work, adventure, and solitude. Naeli thrived in this balance, confident in her abilities and unafraid of what the world might bring. She was a woman who faced challenges head-on, who carried her responsibilities with pride, and who lived life on her own terms. And though she often repeated the phrase about no man being strong enough for her, she did so with certainty, not bitterness, a declaration of her independence and a reflection of her respect for true strength. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the village, Naeli stood on the ridge, looking out over the desert. The wind stirred her hair and whispered through the rocks. She felt the land beneath her feet, the heartbeat of the earth connecting her to everything around her. This was her home, her world, and she moved through it with courage and grace. Naeli knew that she was strong, capable, and unyielding, and in her heart she understood that this strength was not just in her arms or legs, but in her spirit, a spirit that would face whatever challenges the desert, the village, or life itself might bring. The desert had a quiet rhythm, broken only by the wind whispering through the sagebrush and the distant calls of birds circling high above. Naeli moved through it as naturally as the sun moved across the sky, her feet sure on the rocky terrain, her eyes always scanning the horizon. She had grown used to her solitary life and the independence that came with it. Each day was filled with work, hunting, and learning more about the land she loved. Life in the village was steady, predictable, and safe, as much as the desert could be. Yet as the seasons changed, something unexpected was about to arrive. It began one morning when Naeli noticed movement in the distance. A figure appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the rising sun. At first, she thought it might be a traveler, a trader, or perhaps someone lost. But as the figure grew closer, she could see that it was a man, riding a lone horse across the desert with ease. He moved with a quiet confidence, the kind that came from years of surviving harsh conditions. His hat shaded his face, but Naeli could tell he was alert and capable. The villagers had seen travelers before, but there was something different about this man. The man dismounted near the edge of the village and began tending to his horse. He didn't rush or make loud noises, and he didn't look around with suspicion or greed. Naeli watched him from a distance, curious but cautious. She had learned long ago not to judge strangers too quickly. The desert could be dangerous, and not everyone who appeared calm and capable was trustworthy. But there was a quiet strength in the way he handled his horse, a patience that seemed unusual. Later that day, Naeli encountered him near the river. He was collecting water for his horse, careful not to spill a drop. When he saw her approaching, he nodded respectfully but did not speak immediately. Naeli, unsure how to feel, kept her distance. She had spent most of her life relying on herself, and she did not need anyone to interfere with her routines. The man's calm demeanor, however, did not intimidate her. In fact, it was oddly comforting. "Good morning," he finally said, his voice steady but friendly. "I am Silas. I'm passing through and thought I'd rest here for a while." Naeli nodded. "I am Naeli," she replied. Her tone was polite but guarded. She did not offer more than necessary, preferring to observe his character before engaging further. Silas seemed to understand. He did not press for conversation or attention. Instead, he went about his tasks quietly, showing respect for the village and its people, without making any demands. Over the next few days, Silas stayed near the village. Naeli observed him closely, curious about his intentions. He helped where needed, carrying water, repairing a corral, and occasionally assisting the villagers with hunting. What struck Naeli most was his patience and humility. Unlike other men who might have tried to impress or compete with her, Silas never challenged her strength. He matched her pace when working, never trying to dominate or overshadow her. He was not weak, but his strength was quiet, reliable, and steady, a different kind of power than she had encountered before. One afternoon, Naeli was gathering firewood near the edge of a canyon when she heard a shout. She rushed toward the sound and saw a young boy stuck on a narrow ledge, unable to climb back up. Naeli was about to move forward to help him when Silas appeared, already assessing the situation. Without hesitation, he handed her a rope and positioned himself carefully to assist. Together, they guided the boy back to safety. Naeli realized, for the first time, that strength could be shared. It did not diminish her own abilities. Instead, it made the task easier and safer. Afterward, they walked back to the village side by side, each silently acknowledging the other's capabilities. Naeli found herself observing Silas more closely, noticing the way he moved, the careful attention he paid to his surroundings, and the gentle way he treated animals and people alike. He did not boast or demand recognition. Instead, he seemed to understand the balance between courage and patience, action and thought. Naeli had always valued independence, but she could not ignore the impression he left on her. Even in the evenings, when the village settled into quiet routines, Naeli noticed Silas nearby. He would sit by the fire repairing tools or whittling pieces of wood into small figures. Sometimes he would glance up and smile at the children, who were fascinated by his stories of traveling across distant lands. Naeli watched silently, her curiosity growing. She had lived a life of careful observation and self-reliance, yet there was something about Silas that made her wonder if there could be more to life than solitude. One evening, as the sky turned gold and the wind carried the scent of the desert blooms, Nayeli and Silas found themselves on the ridge, overlooking the vast expanse of sand, rock, and distant mountains. Neither spoke for a while. They simply watched the sun sink lower, the colors shifting and blending into the horizon. Finally, Silas broke the silence. "This land is beautiful," he said softly, "but it is not easy. You must be very strong to live here." Nayeli's lips curved into a faint smile. "Strength is not enough sometimes," she replied. "You also need patience, understanding, and respect for the land." Silas nodded. "I can see that you have all of those things," he said, "and more." For a moment, Nayeli considered the weight of his words. They were simple, yet sincere. She had spent so much of her life measuring strength by physical ability, by the challenges she could overcome alone. But Silas saw something different, something she herself often overlooked. She realized that strength could also be measured by character, by how one faced life with calmness and care, and by the respect shown to others. In the following days, their bond grew slowly. Nayeli began to trust Silas's presence, no longer feeling the need to keep him at a distance. They worked together in the fields, hunted side by side, and shared stories by the fire. Silas never tried to compete with her or prove himself superior. Instead, he matched her abilities, learning from her experience while offering his own knowledge and skills when appropriate. The partnership was quiet but strong, built on mutual respect rather than words. Nayeli noticed subtle changes in herself. She felt a sense of calm she had not experienced before, a feeling that she could rely on someone else without losing her independence. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to share her life with another person who understood her strength, rather than someone who feared it or tried to challenge it. Silas was not perfect, but he complimented her in ways she had never expected. One day, a storm swept across the desert, bringing heavy rain and wind that threatened the village. Trees swayed dangerously, and the river rose quickly, turning the dry creek beds into rushing water. Nayeli prepared to act alone, as she always had, but Silas was already there, helping to reinforce homes and secure animals. Together, they worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts and supporting each other. Nayeli realized that having someone reliable by her side did not weaken her. It made her stronger. The storm passed and the village was safe, thanks to their combined efforts. After the storm, as the sky cleared and the sun returned, Nayeli and Silas stood on the ridge, looking over the land they had protected. She felt a deep respect for him, not just as a capable man, but as someone who understood the meaning of true strength. He had proven himself through actions, patience, and thoughtfulness, not through words or challenges. For the first time, Nayeli considered that perhaps there was someone who could meet her on equal footing, someone whose strength was more than physical. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars appeared one by one, Nayeli reflected on the changes she had felt since Silas arrived. Her life had always been full of adventure and independence, yet she realized that companionship, trust, and understanding could also be powerful. She had never allowed herself to imagine a partnership where respect and strength went hand in hand, but Silas had shown her it was possible. Nayeli did not speak of love or attachment yet. Her heart was still guarded, and her pride remained intact, but she could no longer deny the impact of Silas's presence. He had arrived quietly, without fanfare or boast, and had begun to change the way she viewed strength, trust, and connection. The giant Apache woman who had once declared that no man was strong enough for her now felt the stirrings of curiosity, wonder, and perhaps the faintest hint of hope. And so life continued, with the desert stretching endlessly around them, the village thriving under the care of its people, and Nayeli beginning to see that strength could take many forms. Silas was no ordinary traveler. He was steady, patient, and capable in ways that complemented her own abilities. Together, they moved through the land with a new understanding, a quiet partnership that neither rushed nor forced itself. The giant Apache woman was still fierce, independent, and unyielding, but now there was someone beside her who met her strength, not with challenge or arrogance, but with respect and steadfastness. The desert sun rose, harsh and unyielding, turning the sand and rocks into a shimmering sea of heat. Nayeli moved through the village, carrying a heavy bundle of firewood on her shoulder. Her muscles were strong and her steps confident, yet today there was a tension in the air that made her pause. The river that usually trickled gently nearby was swelling, its waters rising faster than she had ever seen. The sky was darker than usual, heavy clouds forming in the distance. Something was coming, something beyond the usual challenges of daily life. Silas was already preparing for what he knew was approaching. He had seen storms like this before in other lands, and he understood the danger. While the villagers moved in small groups trying to secure their homes and animals, Silas went from one adobe house to another, quietly giving advice and helping where he could. Nayeli watched him from a distance, noting the calm and careful way he handled the chaos. Unlike others, he did not panic or shout orders. He simply acted, each movement measured, precise, and purposeful. Nayeli knew that she could face almost anything on her own, but even she realized that this storm was different. The river was swelling, and with it came the threat of flooding. Livestock could be lost, homes could be damaged, and the village's children could be in danger. She gritted her teeth, refusing to show fear, and began moving toward the river with her usual determination. But when she reached the edge, she saw Silas already there, waiting. He gave her a nod, simple and silent, as if saying, "We do this together." Without a word, they began to act. Nayeli ran to gather heavy rocks and fallen logs, using her strength to create makeshift barriers along the riverbank. Silas moved beside her, reinforcing the barriers with careful calculations and ensuring that nothing would be washed away. They did not need to speak. Their actions flowed together as if they had worked as a team for years. Nayeli had always relied on herself, but now she felt something new, the power of shared effort, of strength, combined rather than separate. The storm arrived in full force by mid-afternoon. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the dry desert paths into mud. Wind howled through the canyon, rattling the rooftops and bending the trees. Nayeli and Silas worked tirelessly, their clothes soaked and heavy, their hands raw from gripping rocks and ropes. The villagers looked on, amazed at their coordination. Nayeli was strong, Silas was patient and clever, and together they seemed unstoppable. At one point, a small group of children became trapped near the riverbank, their path blocked by rising water. She sprinted toward them, slipping on the mud but recovering with agility, and lifted the smallest child into her arms. Silas moved quickly beside her, guiding the other children to safety with calm, firm instructions. It was a moment that required both courage and trust. Nayeli realized that she had never needed anyone before in the same way she needed Silas now, not to save herself, but to save others. Their partnership was not about dependence. It was about complementing each other's strengths. The storm continued to rage for hours. Trees were uprooted, small homes were damaged, and the river's edge crept dangerously close to the village. Nayeli and Silas did not rest. When rocks were too heavy, Silas suggested using logs as levers. When the water threatened to sweep away part of the barrier, Naeli's strength combined with Silas's strategy to reinforce it. Their teamwork became seamless, each instinctively understanding what the other needed without words. For Naeli, it was a revelation. She had always believed that no one could match her strength, but Silas had shown her that strength could take many forms: courage, patience, intelligence, and steadfastness. By late evening, the storm began to subside. The rain slowed to a drizzle, the wind softened, and the river, though still swollen, had been kept from overflowing into the village. Naeli looked around, exhausted but proud. She saw the villagers safe, the livestock accounted for, and the homes standing despite the storm's fury. Silas stood beside her, equally tired, but his calm expression never faltered. They had faced the storm together and emerged victorious. After the immediate danger passed, Naeli and Silas walked through the village, checking on families and helping repair damage. Villagers thanked them, but Naeli noticed something deeper within herself. She felt a sense of admiration and respect for Silas that went beyond his skill. He had not tried to dominate or impress. He had simply acted with integrity and wisdom. For Naeli, this was a new understanding. Strength was not just about lifting heavy objects or facing physical challenges. It was also about character, judgment, and the quiet power of doing the right thing under pressure. That evening, as the village settled into a cautious calm, Naeli found herself sitting by the fire, cleaning her bow and arrows. Silas joined her, repairing his own gear with careful attention. The silence between them was comfortable, a sign that words were not always needed. Finally, Naeli spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Today was different," she said. "I have faced many challenges, but this was not just about strength. It was about trust, planning, and understanding."
You helped me see that.
Silas looked up and nodded. "We helped each other," he said simply. "That is all." Naeli smiled faintly. She had always been independent, proud of her ability to face life alone. But now she realized that partnership could be another form of strength, one that did not diminish her, but enhanced it. She began to see Silas not as someone who might compete with her, but as someone who could walk beside her, someone who matched her courage and respected her abilities. Over the next few days, Naeli noticed the subtle changes in the village. People who had been cautious or fearful of strangers now approached with more confidence, inspired by the teamwork between Naeli and Silas. Children began to imitate their actions, learning the value of cooperation and respect. Naeli herself felt a quiet satisfaction, not from the praise, but from the knowledge that together, she and Silas had protected their home. One afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds and the desert began to dry, Naeli and Silas sat on a ridge overlooking the village. They watched as villagers repaired fences, rebuilt small homes, and cared for animals. The river sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting the resilience of both the land and its people. Naeli felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the land she loved, but to Silas, who had proven himself in ways she had never imagined. "You are different from anyone I have met," Naeli said after a long pause. "You do not seek to prove yourself, and yet you are strong in ways I did not understand before." Silas smiled faintly. "Strength is not always loud," he replied. "Sometimes it is quiet, patient, and steady. That is what I try to be." Naeli considered his words carefully. She had spent her life measuring strength by courage, skill, and the ability to face challenges alone. But she had learned that strength could take many forms, and sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when to rely on someone else, when to share the burden rather than carry it alone. Silas had shown her that. As the days passed, their partnership became more natural. They worked side by side, hunting, gathering, and repairing the village. Nayeli no longer felt the need to prove herself to anyone, including Silas. Instead, she began to appreciate the way he complemented her abilities, the way his calm presence allowed her to see new solutions and strategies. Together, they faced not just physical challenges, but the trials of life in a harsh, unpredictable land. Through the storm and its aftermath, Nayeli realized something she had never admitted to herself. For the first time, she felt the possibility of connection, a partnership built on respect, trust, and shared strength. Silas was not just a traveler passing through. He had become someone she could rely on, someone whose presence added to her own abilities rather than diminished them. That night, under a sky full of stars, Nayeli reflected on the events of the past days. She thought of the storm, the rising river, and the moments when courage and trust had been tested. She thought of Silas, quiet, steady, and unwavering, and she felt a shift within herself. The giant Apache woman who had once declared that no man was strong enough for her now understood that true strength could be shared. It could be quiet, patient, and steadfast. And perhaps, just perhaps, it could be something more than physical, something that touched the heart. The desert was calm after the storm, the air fresh and cool, carrying the scent of wet sand and sage. The river had returned to its normal course, flowing quietly and steadily. Birds sang from the trees, and small animals cautiously re-emerged from their hiding places. Life in the village was slowly returning to its usual rhythm, but for Nayeli, everything felt subtly changed. The days of working alone, of relying solely on her own strength, were behind her. Silas had become more than just a companion in work. He had begun to occupy a space in her thoughts she had never allowed anyone to enter. Nayeli woke early one morning, as she always did, to gather water and check the traps she had set for small game. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the desert. She moved with her usual confidence, her mind alert, but her heart carried a new awareness. She thought of Silas, who had stayed in the village through the storm and continued to help even when the immediate danger had passed. His presence was steady, calm, and reliable. She realized that she had grown to expect him beside her, and that his absence would be noticed immediately. As she approached the river to refill her water containers, she found Silas already there, kneeling by the water and carefully cleaning his tools. He looked up and smiled as he saw her approaching, a warm expression that did not demand attention, but simply acknowledged her presence. Nayeli felt a small, unfamiliar warmth at the sight of him. She nodded in greeting, and without speaking, they continued their work side by side, each respecting the other's space and pace. In the days that followed, their partnership extended beyond survival and labor. Nayeli began to notice the quiet ways Silas cared for the village and its people. He did not seek recognition or praise. He simply acted where help was needed. When he saw an elderly woman struggling to carry firewood, he offered assistance without a word. When a child stumbled while climbing a rocky path, he caught the child gently, guiding them back to safety. Nayeli watched these moments closely, feeling a growing admiration for him. She began to understand that strength was not only measured in physical abilities, but also in kindness, patience, and wisdom. One afternoon, Nayeli invited Silas to join her on a hunting trip farther from the village than she usually went alone. She wanted to test her skills, to challenge herself, but also to see how he handled the wilderness on his own terms. They rode side by side, moving carefully across the rocky terrain. Nayeli noticed the way Silas observed the land, not rushing, but noting every detail, the tracks of animals, the signs of water, the changes in the wind. He was patient and thoughtful, qualities she admired deeply. When they reached a grove of trees where deer were known to graze, they split up to track their prey. Nayeli moved swiftly and silently, her eyes scanning the ground for signs of movement. Silas followed with equal care, demonstrating a patience that was different from her own methodical speed. They did not compete. Instead, they shared their findings, exchanging tips and insights. Nayeli realized that this was a new kind of partnership, one that combined their strengths rather than testing them against each other. During the hunt, Nayeli spotted a young buck and prepared to take aim. Silas, noticing a danger she had not seen, signaled her to wait. A sudden movement in the bushes revealed a wild coyote, hungry and aggressive. Nayeli paused, and together they quickly devised a way to scare it away without harming it. The situation required both her courage and his careful planning. The coyote eventually retreated, and the buck moved to safer ground. Nayeli smiled at Silas, realizing once again that their combined skills made them stronger than they could ever be alone. After the hunt, they returned to the village with their catch. Nayeli carried the meat while Silas tended the horse and helped repair a small section of a corral damaged in the storm. Their teamwork was natural and unspoken, each anticipating the other's needs. That evening, they sat together by the fire, sharing a simple meal and stories of their day. Nayeli found herself opening up in ways she had never before, talking about her childhood, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the pride she felt in her independence. Silas listened with patience, never interrupting or judging, simply offering understanding and occasional insights. Over the following weeks, their bond grew deeper. They worked together in the fields, hunted together, and explored the surrounding desert. Silas never tried to dominate or overshadow Nayeli. Instead, he matched her strength with quiet competence and reliability. Nayeli, in turn, found herself relying on him in ways that felt natural rather than forced. She realized that this trust was not a weakness, but another form of strength. It allowed her to take on greater challenges, knowing that she had someone dependable at her side. One evening, Nayeli and Silas walked along a ridge overlooking the desert, watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, reflecting off the rocks and sand in brilliant shades of orange and red. Nayeli felt a sense of peace she had not experienced before. The harshness of the desert was still present, but the presence of Silas beside her made it feel less daunting. She understood that strength alone did not make life bearable. Connection, trust, and understanding were equally important. Silas broke the silence, speaking softly. "You are remarkable, Nayeli," he said. "Not just in strength, but in spirit. I have traveled through many lands and met many people, but few have the courage and skill that you have." "You are extraordinary." Nayeli looked at him, studying his expression. She had grown accustomed to people being impressed by her physical abilities, but his words felt different. They were sincere, not admiring for the sake of admiration. She felt a warmth in her chest, a recognition that someone truly saw her, not just her strength, but her character. "Thank you, Silas," she replied quietly. "You are not ordinary either. You have shown me patience, understanding, and a strength I did not fully recognize before. I did not know it was possible to feel this way." Silas smiled faintly. "I think it is always possible," he said. "Sometimes we just need the right person to help us see it." Their conversations became more frequent, yet they remained natural and unforced. They talked about the desert, their experiences, and the lessons they had learned from life. Nayeli began to see Silas as someone who could match her not only in skill but in spirit. she felt a growing sense of respect, admiration, and perhaps even something deeper, though she did not name it aloud. One morning, Nayeli found herself struggling to lift a heavy log for the village fence. She was used to doing such tasks alone, but this time, the weight was greater than expected. Silas noticed and stepped forward without hesitation, helping her lift and position it. Together, they completed the task with ease. Nayeli paused, realizing that sharing effort did not make her weaker. It allowed her to achieve more. She looked at Silas with a mixture of gratitude and admiration, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had built. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, repairing tools, sharpening arrows, or simply talking. Nayeli began to trust him with her thoughts and feelings, sharing her hopes, fears, and reflections. Silas responded with patience, understanding, and gentle insight. Their connection grew steadily, like the slow, persistent flow of a river carving its way through the desert rocks. Nayeli felt a sense of belonging and partnership she had never known before. The villagers began to notice the change as well. They saw Nayeli and Silas working together, supporting each other, and leading by example. The children looked up to them, learning the value of cooperation, respect, and shared effort. Nayeli, who had always been a symbol of independence and strength, now embodied another lesson, that true strength could include trust, partnership, and understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, Nayeli and Silas stood on a high ridge looking out over the village. The desert stretched endlessly before them, vast and beautiful, and yet it no longer seemed intimidating. Together they had faced storms, challenges, and the harshness of the land. They had learned from each other, supported each other, and grown together. Nayeli realized that the giant Apache woman who had once declared that no man was strong enough for her had discovered something unexpected, a partnership built on respect, trust, and shared strength. She turned to Silas, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I have faced many challenges in my life," she said softly, "but I have never felt stronger than I do with you by my side." Silas looked at her, a gentle smile on his face. "And I have never felt more certain that true strength comes not from acting alone, but from standing together," he replied. In that moment, Nayeli understood the depth of what they shared. It was more than companionship. It was a connection of hearts, minds, and spirits. She had always valued independence, but she now recognized that strength and partnership could coexist, enhancing rather than diminishing each other. The desert dawn broke slowly, painting the sky with soft pink and gold hues. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sand, sage, and distant blooming flowers. Nayeli stood on a ridge overlooking the village, the wind tugging gently at her hair. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, a feeling she had not known before. The village had weathered the storm, life had returned to its usual rhythm, and for the first time in a long while, Nayeli felt a sense of completion, not from her strength alone, but from what she and Silas had built together. Silas approached quietly, carrying a bundle of firewood for the villagers. He smiled at Nayeli, his expression calm but warm, as though he had known her thoughts even before she spoke them. Nayeli returned the smile, a soft recognition of the connection they now shared. There was a trust between them that went deeper than words, a partnership formed through shared struggles, mutual respect, and understanding. It was a strength that neither muscle nor skill could measure. Over the weeks that followed, Nayeli and Silas worked together seamlessly. They hunted, gathered, and tended the village, their actions almost instinctive in their coordination. Nayeli noticed how their presence together inspired others. Villagers who had once feared the harshness of the desert began to move with greater confidence. Children watched them, learning the value of cooperation, patience, and respect. Naeli realized that her own strength had grown, not just from her physical abilities, but from the ability to rely on and trust another person. One afternoon, they went to the far side of the canyon, where the land rose sharply and the rocks were steep. Naeli often ventured here alone, testing her agility and courage, but this time she wanted Silas to see the terrain and understand the challenges she faced. They climbed together, moving carefully over the uneven rocks, helping each other when necessary. Silas never took the lead without asking, and Naeli never felt diminished by his presence. They worked as equals, each respecting the other's skill and strength. At the top of the ridge, they paused, looking out over the endless desert. The land stretched endlessly, vast and beautiful, and yet it no longer seemed daunting to Naeli. She realized that what had once been a solitary challenge was now something they could face together. Silas looked at her and spoke softly. "You are incredible, Naeli," he said. "Not just in strength, but in heart and mind. I have traveled many lands, but I have never met anyone like you." Naeli felt warmth rise in her chest. She had always been proud of her strength, but Silas's words touched something deeper. "And you, Silas," she replied, "are strong in ways I did not expect. You have patience, understanding, and courage. I have learned more from you than I ever thought possible." They descended from the ridge together, moving with ease and confidence. The village below was alive with activity. Children played near the river, villagers repaired fences and homes, and the scent of cooking fires drifted on the warm afternoon air. Naeli and Silas worked side by side, helping where needed and teaching the younger villagers new skills. Each task was a reminder that strength was not only about what one could do alone, but what could be accomplished together. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange, purple, and gold, Naeli and Silas sat near the fire outside the village. The stars began to appear one by one, sparkling against the deepening blue sky. Silence hung between them, comfortable and natural, until Naeli spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I used to believe that no man was strong enough for me," she said. "I thought strength was measured only by muscle, courage, and the ability to face life alone. But I was wrong. True strength is more than that. It is patience, trust, understanding, and the ability to stand together. I have found that with you." Silas reached out and placed a hand over hers. "And I have found that true strength is not about proving oneself," he said. "It is about supporting, respecting, and trusting. With you, Naeli, I have learned what that truly means." Naeli felt a sense of peace she had never known. The independence she had always cherished was still part of her, but it no longer meant facing the world alone. She had discovered that strength could be shared, that partnership could enhance her abilities rather than diminish them. She realized that love, respect, and mutual understanding were not weaknesses. They were powerful forces that allowed both people to grow. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened further. They trained together, exploring the desert and testing their skills. Naeli taught Silas the finer points of tracking and hunting in the rugged terrain, while Silas shared strategies for planning, observation, and patience. Together, they became not only stronger individually but also as a team. The villagers noticed their partnership, respecting it and often turning to them for guidance. Naeli's leadership was now complemented by Silas's wisdom, creating a harmony that benefited everyone. One day, a traveler passed through the village, bringing news from distant lands. Naeli listened intently, intrigued by the stories, but her attention kept returning to Silas. They worked together to help the traveler repair his wagon and tended to the horses. As they moved in quiet coordination, Nayeli realized that her life had changed in ways she could not have predicted. She had once believed she needed no one, that no man could match her strength. But now she understood that the right person could make life richer, fuller, and more meaningful. As the sun sank behind the mountains, Nayeli and Silas stood on a ridge once more, looking out over the desert. The sky was a canvas of colors, reflecting the beauty and harshness of the land. Nayeli felt gratitude for everything: the village, the desert, the lessons she had learned, and most of all, Silas. She understood that strength was not measured only by the challenges she could face alone, but by the trust, respect, and partnership she had discovered. "You have changed my life, Silas," she said softly. "I thought I could face everything alone. I was proud of my strength, but now I see that life is richer when shared. You have shown me that strength and partnership can coexist, and that together we are stronger than I ever imagined." Silas smiled, his eyes reflecting the fading light of the sun. "And you have shown me what it truly means to be strong," he replied, "not just in body, but in heart, mind, and spirit. With you, Nayeli, I have learned the meaning of courage, trust, and true partnership." They stood together, silent for a moment, feeling the bond that had grown between them. It was a connection built on shared struggles, respect, trust, and admiration. Nayeli realized that she had found someone who matched her in strength, not by trying to compete, but by complementing her abilities and understanding her spirit. Silas had proven himself in action, thought, and character, the kind of strength that mattered most. As night fell and the stars filled the sky, Nayeli and Silas walked back to the village. The firelight from the homes illuminated their path, casting long shadows on the desert floor. Children played nearby, villagers tended their animals, and the wind carried the quiet sounds of life and laughter. Nayeli felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She had always been independent, strong, and fearless, but now she understood that strength could be shared, that partnership could enhance rather than diminish her abilities. That night, they sat together under the stars, talking quietly about the future. They spoke of the land, the village, and the lessons they had learned. Nayeli shared her hopes and dreams, and Silas listened with care, offering encouragement and understanding. In that moment, they both realized that they had found something rare and precious, a partnership that was equal, respectful, and strong in every sense of the word. The giant Apache woman, once determined to face the world alone, had discovered that true strength could include trust, respect, and shared effort. Silas, the quiet and steadfast cowboy, had proven that strength was not just measured in skill or courage, but in character and understanding. Together they had faced storms, challenges, and the harshness of the desert, and emerged stronger, not just individually, but as a team. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly overhead, Nayeli and Silas sat in quiet companionship, the desert stretching endlessly around them. They had found in each other a bond that was rare and enduring, a partnership built on mutual respect, admiration, and trust. Nayeli knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but with Silas by her side, she felt confident, secure, and more alive than ever before. In the quiet of the desert night, the giant Apache woman whispered softly to herself, a smile on her lips. "No man is strong enough for me, except perhaps one." And beside her, Silas smiled, understanding completely, as the stars looked down on two people whose strength, love, and partnership had finally found their place in the world.